Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the thesis defense of Isael Real Ramírez. I'd like to welcome all of you who are watching online, and also I'd like to welcome our two readers, Professors Gabriel Rodríguez and David Auerbach. So this morning we'll begin with a presentation from a student. So Isael, when you are ready, you can present your presentation.
All right. Thank you, for the introduction. And before starting, just very quickly, I want to thank my two readers for agreeing to be here today, and also thank anybody who might be watching. I appreciate the support. All right. So let me share. Okay. So my thesis is titled "The Lord of the Shadows," a translation of excerpts from El Dueño de las Sombras by Care Santos. Right? It is an uh, Spanish to English translation from El Dueño de las Sombras. So the author, Care Santos, she is a Catalan and Spanish writer who was born in Barcelona. She began writing when she was 8 years old and published her first book at 25, which was titled Cuentos Críticos. And since then, she has published novels, collection of short stories, poetry, children's books, and young adult novels. Her work has been translated into many different languages, including English, German, French, Italian, Korean, and Chinese. And she has won various awards, including the Ramon Lull, which is awarded to text written in Catalan, and the Cervantes Chico for her contributions to the field of just literature. So the source text, El Dueño de las Sombras, was published in 2006, although my translation is based on the edition published in 2016. It has some very minor differences, like some different wording and some corrections. It is a young adult novel with elements of horror and mystery. It's the first entry in a trilogy titled the Eblus Trilogy. The other two are Crypta and Sapere Aude. And this first entry, it tells the story of the Albaz family, which are subjected to countless supernatural tragedies over the generations. And the mystery of the novel lies in what or who is responsible. So the novel is divided into three parts: El desván de las muñecas, Libro de familia, Que hablen los muertos, and Eblus. So for my translation, I chose at least one excerpt from each of the three parts so that it would be a more comprehensive view of the book. From the first part, I chose chapter 3, titled El Pozo, and El Pozo del Diablo Leyenda, which is a fragment from chapter 7, titled Rebecca. From the second part, I chose chapter 14, Ursula, and the third part, since it does not have clearly identified chapters, I chose pages 357 to 370. So to provide some context, I'll quickly go over the characters relevant to the excerpts. First, we have Natalia Albaz. She is a 15-year-old girl. She is somewhat reserved, but she also has that typical teenage snark. Her older sister, Rebecca, who is more outspoken and loud, and Rebecca's boyfriend, Bernal, who is polite and friendly. We also have Ursula. She's a mentally unstable woman who is being haunted by the spirit of her dead sister-in-law, Micaela Albaz, who only emerges from bodies of water, and she wants Ursula to join her underwater. And Eblus, who is the title character of the trilogy, he is a jinn or a genie with a great capacity for evil. He's often believed to be the devil by humans, and he is the one responsible for the misfortunes of the Albaz family. So, why translate El Dueño de la Sombra? Well, First of all, it hasn't been translated to any other language, which I find curious considering how much of her work has been translated. So, I figured that this novel was due for a translation. It also holds personal significance because it is one of my favorite novels of all time, and it is partly responsible for my love of the horror genre. And I believe that it holds literary value. It is a well-executed story that plays with writing conventions in ways that I find unique and effective. So before getting into the translation challenges that I face, I wanted to talk about how the novel was influenced by Spanish culture, history, and folklore. In the first edition of the book, there is an author's note in which Santos describes her process. She mentions that a lot of the locations are real world locations, such as Sierra de Santo Domingo, the abandoned town of Tiermas, and the municipality of La Llana. So she goes over how she did a lot of research to properly depict these Spanish locations in her book. She also talks about the Spanish author Gustavo Adolfo Becker and his book Rimas y Leyendas, which is a collection of his poetry and short stories. In this title, there is a short story titled Los Ojos Verdes, which is the story of a man who falls in love with a woman who lives in the water. At the end of the story, the man presumably drowns after joining her under the water. So you can see that this sort of parallels the story of Ursula that I mentioned before, and it even has some similar imagery, like we can see in this excerpt from both texts, right? From Los Ojos Verdes, Fernando dio un paso hacia ella, otro, y sintió unos brazos delgados y flexibles que liaban a su cuello y una sensación fría en sus labios ardorosos. Y en el dueño de las sombras, di 1, 2, 3 pasos más hasta quedar a su alcance. Entonces me rodeó con aquellos brazos blancos, finos como ramas. Un abrazo frío como la muerte. Alright, so now we can get into the translation challenges. So I had I divided it into two main categories, which are cultural aspects and style and tone, and I'll also go over some miscellaneous aspects. So there are many cultural aspects in the novel, including names of people, names of locations, cultural references, certain cultural terms and idioms. So I considered going with either foreignization or the domestication approach. Foreignization being, keeping that cultural aspect intact, while the domestication seeks to neutralize that cultural aspect. So I knew that my target audience is American English speakers, but I also was aware that my source text had a setting was Spanish, and that was essential to its identity. So my solution was to take a balanced approach in which I kept those cultural aspects intact, but also provided enough context for my audience to be able to follow along. I basically wanted my audience to be aware that they are reading a text that is written in Spanish and that takes place in Spain. So to deal with these aspects, I used strategies like literal translation, amplification, equivalence, and long words. We'll be seeing some examples of that now. In literal translation, we have Diario ABC en su edición de Madrid, which I translated as ABC Newspaper Madrid Edition. And Sierra de Santo Domingo, which I translated as Santo Domingo Mountain Range. I didn't have to change much in this translation, and I didn't have to add any context because it was already self-explanatory. In others, I had to add context, use amplification, such as with las fiestas de Ejea de los Caballeros. Ejea de los Caballeros being a municipality in Spain. So, I added in the nearby town of Ejea de los Caballeros. So that my reader would be able to know what it was. I did the same with Pedro Botero, which is a pseudonym for the devil used in Spain. In this case, I left Pedro Botero and I added an English pseudonym, Old Scratch, so that the audience could infer, the nature of Pedro Botero. I use equivalents for idioms, such as una bronca de antología, which I translated as the chewing out of the century, and de mi cosecha, which I translated as a personal touch. And I use two long words, which were comarca and calimocho. So the reason I did not translate these two was because I felt that they were terms that were closely related to Spanish culture. Calimocho being like a Spanish drink consisting of wine and cola, and comarca being, what they called a certain administrative region in Spain. So regarding style and tone is an important part of literary translation. Style refers to the way the author writes, while the tone refers more to their attitude toward the subject matter, the characters, or the readers. In literary translation, these aspects are as important, if not more important, than the content itself. So I had to make sure that I got it right. In my case, each of the excerpts that I chose had a different point of view, and thusly it had a different tone. So I identified the features of each one of these excerpts. El Pozo, it is from the perspective of Natalia Alpaz, so sometimes Bernal, but mostly Natalia. It has a more, casual, almost conversational tone, which is further cemented by the presence of sentence fragments. I would say that this chapter is the one that feels the most like a young adult novel due to its main characters being teenagers. In El Pozo del Diario Leyenda, this is a transcription of an old legend done by an ethnologist and published in an academic journal. It has a more formal tone, featuring more poetic language and elevated vocabulary. And I made the decision to avoid using contractions to emulate that style. With Ursula, it is narrated by Ursula herself. It is written as a stream of consciousness, like a wall of text. There are no punctuation to differentiate between dialogue and narration, and it has many repeated phrases. All of this serves to give the text a more neurotic feeling, which, represents Ursula's mental state. So, I had to make sure to keep those aspects in my translation. And finally, in pages 357 to 370, the narrator is Eblus. He has a superiority complex, so his tone is more formal and condescending. And like I did with El Pozo del Diablo, I also avoided using contractions. He consistently insults the reader's intelligence, and he has a more vulgar side, which contrasts with his more elegant speech. So I also had to make sure that I kept that in. Okay, so about the vulgar language, it is present in El Pozo and in pages 357 to 370. So according to Antonio Jimenez, like when it comes to translating profanities, we should consider the context in which the profanity appears. Things such as the tone, the social context of the person, the situation that caused the profanity to be said, the person to whom the message is directed, and the intention with which the message is expressed. So here I have two examples of vulgar language and how I handled it. Now, the first one, we have mierda and joder, which I translated pretty literally to shit and fuck. So this is spoken by Rebecca, who, as I mentioned, is more outspoken, more loud. In this chapter, she's pretty liberal with her use of profanities. So, it felt in character for her to say curse words in English as well. In the second one, this is spoken by Bernal. He's telling Rebecca to deja de hacer el gilipollas y sube. So while gilipollas is considered a profanity, I thought that since the one who's saying it was Bernal, who is often depicted as more passive, non-confrontational, like he's even called weak-willed in the novel, it didn't feel appropriate to translate it as something like stop being a dumbass or stop fucking around. It didn't feel in character, so I said stop messing around. Also, the context is important, as Bernal is saying this, like I said, to Rebecca, who is in this scene. She's inside a well looking for her cell phone, and instead of quickly coming up after finding it, she insists on staying there and joking around. So Bernal doesn't mean to insult her. He just is worried and wants her to come up. So lastly, I'll go over some miscellaneous challenges. There were some cases of ambiguity, such as here, Rebeca iba tras él, haciendo esfuerzo por ver dónde ponía los pies, which I translated as Rebecca went after him, struggling to see where he stepped. So the ambiguity here comes from ver donde ponía los pies, as it can either mean where Rebecca, was stepping, or where he, which was Bernal, was stepping. So here I had to choose one which seemed the most correct, and I ended up choosing where he stepped, since I figured that Rebecca was trying to follow Bernal's lead. I also changed some sentences in order to avoid redundancy and add more conciseness, such as la muchacha caminaba todos los días hasta el cauce del río Rigel. I translated as the young woman walked to the Rigel River. I took out the cauce part because it wouldn't sound as well saying something like the Rigel River riverbed, and it wasn't necessary for the meaning of the sentence. There were some non-translatable aspects of Spanish which I had to contend with, such as the use of diminutives like gorritos, camisitas, which I translated as tiny has tiny shirts, and the concept of tutear, which I translated as addressing as not calling somebody sir. And there were some unknown words such as alfalfa, which I had to research. Alfalfa, I found out, is a plant commonly used for forage, so that's how I translated it. And pienso, which is fodder. And there were also some sentences that were sort of difficult to understand and made it difficult to translate, such as mi santuario, ese sótano excavado en el subsuelo que me acompaña allí donde voy, which it was difficult to make out what it was trying to communicate, but I translated it to the best of my abilities as my sanctuary, the basement burrowed in the underground that gives me company. And yeah, thank you for listening. That would be all for my presentation.
Thank you, Isael. That was very interesting. I learned some things I didn't already know. So now let's move on to the section in which the readers will give you their comments, and I've asked Gabriel if he will go first, so I'll turn it over to him.
All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me, Isael. My name is Gabriel Rodríguez. I'm a professor here at the graduate program in translation, and I've taught Isael in various classes, mainly the translation theory and the comics books of translation class, and it's always excelled as a student, and so thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, congratulations, Isael, for a good job with this. I really enjoyed that you chose something that is, I haven't dealt with it a lot in the program, which is horror writing. I love horror writing personally. I do read a lot of anything from Stephen King to H.G. Wells, some of his novels considered horror and more. So very good, in line with my interest. I really enjoyed what you did. I really enjoyed the structure of the book. I think you made a good selection of showing us what happened in ABC, so you can deliver at the end. I really, really liked. At first, I read it in your note, and I was like, "How is this going to work?" I had my doubts, but once I read it, I said it worked. So very good in making that selection. I do have observations, as per usual, and it's normal. Some of them pertaining to format. First of all, what format or style guide did you use for this thesis?
Okay, so I use the MLA style format.
Okay, so if it's MLA, there are certain things that um, I haven't seen in MLA, to be honest. For example, when you quote things, it is inside a parenthesis, not, it doesn't have the scare quotes that I know from. It shouldn't have them. And also, there are some
Yeah.
instances of titles that you cite, but they're not in italics. But this is just a matter of style. This is I'll let you know. I added references to the Purdue OWL website on how to
Okay.
use MLA, and they do have a step by step on how to use that style. But that's in terms of styling. That happens. Don't worry about that. With the rest of the format, let me look for. I'm looking for certain comments. In terms of structure, uh, you did very well. There are some things that I would like some more of. For example, you in certain occasions, and I'm still trying to find it here. In certain occasions, you explain uh, how something sounded in Spanish, how something you found in the source text, and then what how you approached it. But once you close your explanation of what you did not offer neither an example to let the reader know and how it resulted in the note. It's like a mathematical equation. I
Okay.
added A, I added B, and that's it. And in that case, I added A, I added B, and this is the result with C that you'll later look on within context. But let me find one instance of this that I'm looking for it because I just had it here. For example, let's go to page. This is 17 Roman. Uh,
Okay.
You're speaking about Ursula. It says, moreover, it is also a matter of principle. As I dislike having to alter my language, such as eliminating accents and hyphenating surnames to avoid confusing English speakers. That is okay. That is perfect. I like when people insert themselves in their work. That's very good. But what does the theory say about that? How can you use theory to, you know, allow you to do that? Because it's okay that you say I like it this way, but then combine some name translation theory so that you support your argument with it's not only that I like it, it's allowed also as well according to theory
Okay.
and so on. All right. There's a number of
Okay.
occasions of instances of this. Not always you insert yourself, but there are some instances in which you say, "So I resulted or I decided to finish it in this way." Okay, you decided it that way, but we need to have some what the theory says or what theory allowed you to take that
Do-
free freedom to choose. All right.
Okay.
I wrote about those instances. It similarly happened to the idioms. In the same page, I think, yeah, the same page below, there was one instance, however, in which I had to provide a literal translation due to the fact that despite having a similar structure, it was not real idiomatic phrase. Una mirada de esas que el diablo carga de significados y ninguno demasiado bueno. One of those looks at the double loads with meanings and none of them very nice. I taught you in the comics class about translating idioms, and one of the theories about idiom is just leaving them as is, and you could just cite someone. This is an actual theory as purported by so and so that you are allowed to do this. So
Okay.
it's a matter of how you want to build your own argument to solidify and to close it. It's just, I always call it the 1, 2, 3 combo. There's this, I want this, and this is how I defend my choice in it. Uh, I have some various observations. Would you like to say anything about that? Just to give you
No,
some.
no, yeah. I just wanted to say that yeah, it is a good point, and it is something that I did later after in these days that I've been preparing for this thesis that I did think about that. Yeah, I did figure that there was sort of a lack of theory in some parts of my translation, so I do appreciate you bringing it up.
All right. Another thing that I noticed in the translator's note is that you start speaking about the titles of the other stories and you explain about their chapters, how they're divided. Whenever you present one of those titles, you present it in Spanish, but you offer no translation of it, so that if someone is reading them in who's only a native English speaker, would have an idea of what it means. But weirdly enough, you actually start doing it after a while, but you already had the first one not translated, and then after a couple of pages, you start translating them in within a parentheses, which you could have done otherwise, translated it the first time so that people know what they
Yeah.
mean in English and just continue citing them in Spanish because the people are going to know what they meant by already reading them. But by not doing it in the beginning and then doing it afterwards, you're not establishing a precedent or a
Right.
pattern there. You got to be careful with that. But I also noted those instances. And would you like to say anything about that? Let me give you a space as well.
No, I did. I just I do think it was something that I missed, like not translated at the beginning.
It happens. Don't worry about it. It's very normal. Um, I'm gonna go shift now and talk about a actual serious matter that I had with this. And I'm not talking about your thought process. I'm talking about the decision you made.
Yeah.
The word cuñada in
Ah,
that translating it for sister.
right.
For me, that changes dimensions of meaning. Why not in-law?
Hmm.
Why not just in-law? You don't have to say sister-in-law every time because I understand that it is a very long phrase. Come, sister-in-law, come with me to the water. I get it's gonna be very awkward for the specter or whatever is down there in the water telling that to Ursula, but why not just in-law? And again, this is just a thought that I have. I don't know if David has a better way or thought about a better way of going about it.
Actually, given the context, I think the fact that he uses sister makes it creepier.
No, it does, but
So I actually didn't have a problem with
oh,
that.
okay, all right,
I mean, as long as we know the relationship,
all right.
the fact that she's kind of reaching even closer and closer to her, so it's creepier. I didn't have a problem with that one.
Okay, because
We did.
yeah, go ahead.
We did discuss that
Hmm.
quite a bit. I thought that was in the preface, was not? Didn't you mention that in the preface?
No, I did.
It is.
Oh,
It
okay.
is. It is. But I still
Okay.
think, like David said,
Okay.
when I read it in English, I felt it was creepier and held a stronger relation to the main character Ursula because they were sisters. But going back to the source, cuñada then would separate me because it is not the
Right.
same. So yes, I agree with David. It is creepier as a sister if they were sisters. And during that part, and let me know if I'm getting ahead of myself. Did she have to do something with the death?
Yeah. No, yeah.
Okay.
She died. Like right at the end, she. Well, no. Wait. Sorry. Who had? Can you repeat?
Did
the
Ursula have something to do with
okay.
the in-laws' death?
Okay. So not directly,
All
no.
right.
But so like I sort of explained in the preface. Ursula and Michaela, like they had they didn't have a great relationship, mostly because Michaela, she had a twin brother named Uriel, and they were very close until this uncle, who they call like Tio Elvio, Uncle Elvio, like he started to instruct Uriel in like business. They were never specific on what it was, but turns out that Uncle Elvio was just Eblus in disguise.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I
basic,
remember that part. Yeah, I remember that.
yeah, but basically it's like when Michaela, her death was caused by Eblus. In other words, it was caused by Uncle Elvio, and Ursula, although she wasn't directly responsible for her death, she was brought in by Uncle Elvio, and she also knew that Michaela was going to die.
Okay.
Because she had
Yeah, 17.
already.
Yeah, the whole the curse was there in place. I remember that, but I didn't know how the demon or devil had manifested the death if it were through Ursula that she did something that would, because like the story says there is about an air of vengeance in what Michaela is trying to do. But I was trying, well, vengeance, why? What did Ursula have to do with it if it was part of a curse? That's just what I was pondering.
I think it might be helpful to mention once sister-in-law.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Okay. So the first time say
Mhm.
sister-in-law or saying that's my sister-in-law, and
Yeah,
then just
yeah.
mention sister after that, and we all will understand that she's just shortening the sister-in-law. Very good. Yeah. Thank you, David.
Yeah, I do
Good
like.
idea. Yeah.
No, that's a good resolution. Um, I think. Okay. So, and the last thing I'm gonna do, because I know in picking the rest of them are just
Oh,
commas and semicolons and things that I just thought were different. I do understand, and I do and accept, like I do see the calimocho and stuff like that, leaving it as they are, because they are, it's like mofongo, right? Do they go in italics or not? Even
Yeah.
though they're still a foreign word.
Yeah. Okay. So I did think about that because if you go by the MLA style, they do go in italics. Uh, but this is something that I think that it would be it like now that I'm thinking about it, it would be better if I substantiated it with with theory, like you were mentioning, which is like because I didn't put it in italics because I felt that sort of distracted
Okay.
from the from the text.
All right.
But yeah, like I would have to see if I can substantiate that fact,
Yeah, I mean,
that decision, right?
David, go ahead. What you were gonna say?
Yeah, actually, Alejandro has mentioned this issue a few times in defenses, and one of the things when you italicize a word, it draws attention to the word, and it creates kind of an unnatural foreignness to it. So I can understand, and also I don't like italics being used for food or beverage items.
Okay. I understand that. It's just a matter, like
Yeah.
Isael said, substantiate it in the note, and we're good to go. It's just mention it so that when
Yeah.
someone sees it, okay, so we're aware, because I do understand that italicizing something makes it foreign. So in order to not get caught up in that, just leave it regular and you read it. But we know the decision to leave it non-italics is because it was an author or translator's decision. All right, so that is very good. I'm going to stop there so that David can speak about the note, and then we can go back and circle about the text itself. I do have some observations about them, not too deep. So David, I heed my turn to you.
Okay. Yeah, Gabriel, let's I know it's automatic, I know it's automatic, but this is not a translator's note.
Okay.
A translator's note is something al calce. That's a
Okay.
translator's note. This is a preface.
Preface.
You know, it can be referred to as an introduction. It's something that, you know, we used to refer to it in the PGT as a, you know, la nota. People still do it. They still say
Right.
la nota del traductor. In Spanish, they always say it. They don't say el prefacio, they say la nota del traductor. But that's a tiny little thing at the bottom. I have, you know, quite a few things in, you know, that deal with, and I would say that they're minor in nature. You know, they're generally minor in nature. So I'll start going through them, and Gabriel, if you want to interrupt me because I'm jumping ahead to something, you know, please do. But first of all, Isael, I want to congratulate you. I think that you did an excellent job. I think that, you know, Gabriel has pointed out some very good things, you know, for you to consider, including, and one of the things actually which I felt was necessary was including, you know, a translation of those first excerpts that you have in Spanish. They should be translated because, you know, people are going to want to know. You know, say somebody's reading this preface in English, and, you know, their knowledge of Spanish isn't so great. So, but also it shows you are active there as a translator all the time. So definitely, you know, include those. I going back to my congratulations to you, I also think that you chose very well. Your excerpts were brilliantly chosen, since they give us a very good idea of the novel as a whole. So that was, you did a masterful job of choreographing there. There's some things that you had in your presentation that I think should really be included in your preface. You know, you have, and also I like the way it was structured, you know, with those kind of little tables. Those tables can be very useful because they really direct our attention to things, instead of having to read through text and figure out, okay, I see what's going on here. Tables could have been helpful. But I would consider, you know, your explanation about amplification and equivalence from your presentation. I would consider including that, and also I would include your notes about Becker. You know, that literary resonance in your preface as well, because I think that that's quite important, and it, you know, it just kind of jumped out at me now, and I would certainly consider including it. And before I get into my minor issues, as I'm going to call them, which are, you know, either stylistic, usage related, some typos, and you know, other issues. One thing that, you know, occurs to me is that you know, ghost stories seem to be extremely popular in Spain. And maybe there's a reason for this, or maybe there are reasons for this. And I'm wondering if any studies have been done about that. But, you know, you may be familiar with, you know, everybody has a favorite thing, but you may, and this is a film, although I don't know the text that it's based on, but El Espinazo del Diablo by Guillermo del Toro, which, you know, also provides a political perspective for you know, a political explanation for the ghost story genre, you know, in Spain, and that is, you know, the persistence of these ghosts from the political past. So I think that, you know, it might have been interesting to theorize a little bit about that. But look, this is your work. I'm inserting this, you know, as an observation.
Of course.
You know, but I'm sure that studies have been done about this. In any event, going on to the minor issues, and some of them are not so minor, some of them are very minor. To start off with, because I've been doing this for every single thesis defense this semester.
I know it's coming.
You know what's coming.
I know it's coming.
And there have been a lot of. This is number 4 for me, thesis defense. I'm verging on delirium at this stage. But paragraph style. I want to congratulate you for not putting the additional space between indented paragraphs. So bravo for that one, because nobody else so far that we've been through has done that.
So I do remember that you mentioned it in one of your classes, and every time I say, like, every time I do a paragraph, I remember that
Good job.
you don't need to put the extra space if you have like the indentation.
No, and not only do you not have to put the extra space there, but you really don't put the extra space there. You shouldn't. The other thing too, and this is also a pet peeve of mine, is that you should not indent the first paragraph of any section, because it's overkill. It's overkill, and it's it's like 2 spaces after a period. It's something that you really shouldn't do anymore, not in English. Because any published work we open in English, 97.4% of the time, is not there. The very first paragraph will not be indented, because we know that's the first paragraph. Why would you indent it? It looks terrible. So I would consider getting rid of that, and moving into the 21st century. And I provided a little note, by the way, because style guides are very bad about this. But I provided a note from the Chicago Manual of Style about that issue. It'll be, and by the way, I've marked up your thesis. It's in a track changes mode. So, if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask me. I will be sending that to you right after this defense. Okay, now you go into this little, talking about theory in your preface. You go into this little section about foreignization and domestication. And I think that this discussion is a bit outdated. I don't think that translation studies tends to, I think it tends to be less prescriptive nowadays and more descriptive and analytical. So I'm not even sure that it's so relevant, but I guess it does explain something. And your quotes, by Jimenez are worthwhile. And as I said, it would be really nice to see that it translated into English. Okay. There are some prepositional issues, which I'm not going to get into. I'm going to get into some usage issues from the translation itself. So I don't know, Gabriel, do you want to go into the translation itself now, or, and I'll stop and come back?
Yeah, if we're going to the text, let's do that. I have a feeling that mine's going to be short, so I can just go ahead and then they
All right.
continue, right?
Sure.
Okay, so like I said, a lot of the points that David made, I also watched, especially the prepositions part, that they carry over to the main text actually, and I marked them as well, because sometimes you used on when you should have used with, etc., and things like that. But I think those are what David also calls the minor situations. In terms of the text, let me point here. I have some issues, and they're just mostly questions. For example, right from the beginning, Bernal is speaking, and he has a saying that is una frase, and you translated it for 6 words.
Yeah.
What was the thought behind that?
All
I'm just wondering about that one.
Yeah. All right. So the thing was that I think I first translated it as like a phrase, not very literally, but I don't know, it didn't sound right to me to say like it was precisely a phrase from Bernal, or like, oh, since it is something that also repeats, all those instances of saying like phrase, phrase, phrase. I don't know, it didn't sound right to me. Also didn't sound right to say something like a sentence from Bernal, or and the six. I think that the six words came when discussing it with Jane, which is like
Okay.
a way, so sort of like also a way to, I think it sounded better than just saying phrase, saying the six words, which in the translation there were six words. So
Okay. No, they
like,
are 6 words. Yeah, they are 6 words. That's okay.
yeah, no,
But things like that, put them at least something in the preface, in the in the introduction, so that we know what was the logic behind that. Because it's just something that, uh, like you said, 6 words does sound idiomatic more in English, and so just say it. It's just
One thing
yeah.
that we talked about when we discussed that was that 6 words really calls attention to the exact wording and makes the reader say, oh, 6 words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, makes it stick in the mind more.
And you're not changing anything from the source. You're not really going against the source or anything. It's just a style. That's okay. I know that you spoke in the note about the use of contractions, and I do understand that in conversations like dialogue, you can leave them in. I don't not as sure as about the narration, especially in the first one. It's just me. I think this is one of my pet peeves. This is nothing about something. I'm not saying this in a prescriptive manner. I'm just inviting you to think about it a bit longer. Because for me, contractions in narration kind of throw me out. It might be just me, David. What do you think about that? Is it just me making a
It's
big
just
thing?
you.
Okay.
I'd like to say something on that because
Yeah.
I encouraged him to
Okay.
leave to use the contractions in that particular excerpt because we felt like even though it wasn't written in first person, that it was in I've gone blank on her name.
no,
What's her
yeah,
name, Isael?
it's from Natalia's perspective.
Natalia. It sounded like Natalia's voice.
Okay.
It sounded like a teenager had written it.
All right. Yeah,
And
Uh,
so
Yeah,
so
in informal contexts, I mean, really, you need to use an informal and natural context. You need to use contractions, but I think there are some cases, and I actually highlighted them, where you should have done, contractions and you didn't. And there are also some cases where you use contractions and I don't think you should have. So it's not completely consistent, in terms of keeping the tone or the register of the particular circumstance. But you'll see those, and I'm glad you brought it up, Gabriel. Anyway,
right. We were working to get a different tone in each one of those excerpts since there clearly was in the source text. But and that was part of it, but we may have made some wrong choices.
You did a good no, you did a good job because there is a change of tone. Like the second one is very academic formal because it's talking about the legend, and then the third one is a first person narration about the demon. That's you do see it, and I think you did a great job. So the rest of them are just observations. For example, when you're Nati is speaking, Nati you wrote it Naty. I think that's Nati. Nati would be with 2 T's, but in English you have Nat as a nickname for Natalia's. Why not use Nat? That's just something I threw in there, and I have a more serious one I'm trying to look for it, but I can't find it. Okay, the whole old scratch.
right.
You solved that as, or maybe it was Lucifer, comma, or Pedro Botero, comma, or even Old Scratch. I understand the logic of making use old scratch in case someone doesn't understand the Pedro Botero one. But you could have just put it into parentheses after Pedro Botero, not add a whole clause there or old scratch, because for me it's adding something that's not in the source text. If you could have left it something like a note that you would make, a comment that you would throw out there. That's just something I. Let me see. I think the other ones are just word choices. Yeah, the rest of them are word choices. I don't have anything substantial to say a bit beyond what we already spoken about the preface. Tell me.
I do have a question about the old scratch part.
Yeah.
No, I may be wrong, but would not putting old scratch in parentheses next to Pedro Botero sort of imply that it's like the same thing, or like a sort of translation of Pedro Botero? Like I don't know, right?
I understand what you're saying. I understand. For me, it would have been more of a reference. Maybe put it in brackets then, but I don't. I wouldn't think it's a direct translation necessarily of Pedro Botero, even though it sorta is, because it's just another nickname for the devil or this entity. So
Yeah.
it's interchangeable. I hit my turn. That's the last of them. The rest of it is word choice, commas, sentences that go on too long that I thought you should have divided, and vice versa. So the rest of it you'll see them when I send you the notes. It's not nothing else. So, David.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to go back to the preface for a second and just make a comment about your biographical note regarding the author, and you say that she lives in Catalonia, Spain, which I think is a very bad way to put it. That's like saying Puerto Rico, United States.
Right.
You know, I would.
Okay.
She actually lives in Barcelona, so just do that, Barcelona, and Catalunya. I would write it Catalunya with an NY if you're going to mention Catalunya. You know, all things being fair. Okay, now I'm going to get into some other issues, some of which have to do with usage, which don't seem natural. In El Pozo, you refer to the fact that this family lives one street away. You use the term on page 4, one street away. If you're gearing this toward a U.S. audience, it would be a block away, not one street away. There's on page 5, you mentioned that they're walking along a street that's supposedly connecting Ejea de los Caballeros and La Llana. And, you know, you go to Google Maps and you'll see that's not a street. That's a road. You could call it, if you want to, you could refer to it as a highway. It's a very minor highway, you know, it's a rural highway, but I would just call it a road. Okay, there are a couple of cases where I think they're typos and I'm just not sure. On page 6, let me go there for a second. And I have to find exactly where this is. Page 6 of the translation. Yeah, and there we have the street again, and there's a dirt road, but you know, I wouldn't call that a street. Okay, at the end of the first paragraph, the first full paragraph, something that she couldn't confess willy-nilly, and that sheep had to keep bottled up.
Oh no, yeah, that is a typo for sure.
Okay, all right, I thought so. There's one other case of a typo like that. All right, let me go on. when they are in the same story, you refer to a patio, and in this mansion, and usually, the usual translation in English is yard or backyard, but given the nature of this mansion, which is quite luxurious, I might consider garden instead. But patio doesn't seem right, and also it doesn't seem right for the context. It doesn't seem right for horror genre either. There prepositionally, there are a few times where you use toward instead of into, like falling into the void. You have fall toward the void. There's a ladder that's mentioned in the well, and you refer to metallic grips. They're metal, not metallic. And they could be metal rungs, which is more usual. You have a quote here, your sister has ovaries. And I know what you mean, but I don't think that that's really used so much. I think you'd still say your sister has balls or your sister's got balls.
Well, I mean, I did keep that one because in the source text he does say tu hermana tiene ovario, and I thought that it was, that there was a sort of intended play on those words, since the usual quote is tiene bola, you have balls, or tiene cojones, ¿verdad? But since she is a woman, I thought that it was sort of intentional, like a sort of wordplay or like a sort of joke, like, oh, your sister has ovaries.
Okay, all right. It's okay. You can leave it then. You can leave it, but and I see where there may be like a resonance, with something later on. So it's okay. Okay. You use the term inexplainable, and if you go to Ngram Viewer, you have two more predominant choices because inexplainable on the Ngram Viewer comes out flatlining. You have inexplicable or unexplainable, even if inexplainable technically exists. So I would, change that. In the Devil's Well, given the formal context, I wouldn't use within the deadline. And I'm not sure about teenager either because it's very formal. I think instead of within the deadline, I'd say by the appointed time, and use adolescent for teenager. In Ursula, I didn't know why my uterus was dry. Dry. Barren maybe, but dry, that does not sound right. You also have an expression there that I've never seen before in my life, although it's quite poetic, and that's docile water on page 22. I don't know what docile water is, but it's
not threatening.
Docile, but
I don't know. I loved the sound of it, and I didn't tell him to change it.
I should put it in quotes. I don't know. It could be a band name. I'm not sure, but it's it's very strange sounding to me.
Yeah. No, yeah, I do see it. I
Maybe
do
cold
see
waters or not
yeah,
still water,
or
but
still
calm
water also.
Oh,
Because
calm, and
yeah.
Yeah, because I do think that was because that came from the, like, I gotta check. I think the source text does say docile.
I
don't know
think
if
so
that's
too.
true.
I can't remember for sure.
Yeah, but now that you mention it, it's true that it does sound strange in English.
it really does sound strange, and
I liked it. I just thought it sounded like they're like the author, but okay.
Yeah, I really think about it. Maybe look at Power Thesaurus over and over again for something else. I'm not sure, but okay. Then there's another typo in that section, and on page 25, where she says, "I'm ska of the water."
Yeah, I did catch that while I was after I sent the thesis. But thank you.
Okay. In the Ebler section, there's a quote, "I stole Natalia away cleanly from them," which seems quite awkward. I have a suggestion there for "I easily snatched Natalia away from them." But snatch seems like maybe it would work there better. You have another quote there, "occur in the time it takes to blink." In the blink of an eye, that would seem a lot more natural. You have millenniums. I would use millennia, especially given the formality. And "I wish to gift her a doll." Okay. I understand that gift as a verb has pedigree. I don't think it really fits so well, given perhaps the more archaic and formal tone that we need here. And I'm not really fond of it as a verb. So, it's one of those things. Like impact as a verb, which, is used very often. Now, on page 36, I'm not sure if this is a mistake.
Yeah.
And I'll go to it. I'll give the whole context here. Oh, wait. No, okay. Sorry. I have to find it. Yeah, it's toward the bottom of the page. In that sentence that begins, "That is how it always goes if one wants to conduct an effective instruction." And then toward the end, before the dash, you have "a couple years pass." It should be "a couple of years."
Wow.
And I wanted to bring it up because I've had arguments with people who use "couple" without "of," and they insist that it's right. They will not look up anything. They insist they're right. And maybe it's because when you speak, it's like couple of, but you have to have that "couple of" is really "couple of." It has to be there, that "of." So I'm not sure if it was you insisting that "couple" does not need to be used with "of," or but whatever. It's a pet peeve of mine, so I just thought I'd grandstand a little bit.
It's okay.
Oh, the other thing too is when you use objects instead of subjects in that section, because Eblis, that section is supposed to be very, very formal. And on page 38, you have "that of a young man barely older than him." It should be "barely older than he." And you also have a couple of times "it was me," I replied. It should be "it was I."
Yes.
That's my feeling, because this is
Yes.
not informal. And then my last comment is page 43. You have "artifact" spelled ARTEFACT, and that is the UK spelling. It has to be "artifact."
Right.
So that's it. I went through things pretty exhaustively, which means that there wasn't all that much to go through. So And I want to thank you for, I think you maintained the tone. It was really easy to read these, and they were very engaging. And, this is, as I said, this is my 4th thesis defense this semester. So reading a thesis again is, it's like, okay, all right. But once I started to read the stories, it got very engaging. So,
I had to buy the book.
yeah. Yeah. It would make it would make a very good, I shouldn't say this, Netflix series.
It would, though.
But yeah, I know, but Netflix destroys everything, so everything it touches. So, but it would make a very good film, I think. But the only thing about it is it has that literary kind of, metatextual sort of aspect to it. So that might be difficult to render. But anyway,
and it's long.
And it's long. It's long.
So much would have to be left out to make it into a palatable film.
But that's the thing with, visual versus verbal,
True.
Okay, so that's it. That's all I have to say.
Right.
Great. Anyone have any further comments or questions? Okay, well then, Barbara, I think we are ready to say good. Okay, we're back. Welcome back. I hope everyone on the live stream is back with us as well. Isael, to not prolong your suffering, we have decided that we're very happy with the work you've done. It's important that you make these changes and corrections. But given that you are going to do that because you would anyway, we're giving you the grade of sobresaliente. Congratulations, you've done an excellent job.
Thank you.
Great job, Isael. Celebrate. Where are you going? Are you going to Chili's or something like
that? I'm eating a pizza. That's my celebration.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very good one. I would do the same. So very good.
But yeah,
and you do have a tight deadline. So you're going to have to get right on this. Usually we say take a couple of days to well, take a couple of hours to celebrate.
Yeah.
And then then you need to get right onto it because the deadline's tight. But thank you for asking me to be your advisor. This was a treat to work on, and it was a treat to work with you. So.
Thank you, for agreeing to be my advisor, and actually for being the one that kind of got me into translation with those undergraduate classes. And thanks also to David and to Gabriel for their comments, for their classes, and I learned a lot. And I don't know, I'm very grateful. I really am.
You are a great student, Isael. You're great to have in our classes. Please continue to excel in whatever it is that you wish to continue, whether it be academics, work, etc. Keep going, keep working like you do, because you do a great job. So keep going.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
Okay, we have to hang out for a photo op.
Yes.